Howdy do, howdy do. We are back once again. I believe this is slide conversation number 4. And unlike last time, I prepped a whole slew of slides to get myself some digitizing action done. So we're going to hopefully get a whole bunch of stuff done today. I should stipulate right here at the beginning, just checking the time here, that I do need to be done 2 hours from now. So I'm going to give myself like a 10-minute window because I have to be on a video call. I don't have to be, but I want to be on a video call with some friends. And we're doing it at 8. So, all right. Trying to think of what to talk about. I don't know how on earth I am such a chatterbox in in-person conversation, and yet stick me in front of a camera, especially stick me in front of a camera where I'm not talking to anybody actively, and I will be at a loss for words. I will talk about something that's a little bit nifty. We're getting into the area where these plastic sheaths on the slides is coming in. And that makes this particular bit, taking pictures of these things, a little bit smoother, because what you can do with the plastic ones is actually just push them. And then this one's not a plastic one, unfortunately. Whoever was putting these together was not too concerned about making them uniform. But at the very least, I was able, like, if you have a whole bunch of them, you can start sliding them in and feeding them, kind of like how you would do real film if you use this machine to capture that. And I just realized that there's actually already pictures on here. So I'm going to delete the ones I just did and take that blank shot that I'm supposed to do to help myself when I go back and try to put these onto a computer. I counted the amount of data, the amount of gigabytes that all the pictures I've done so far have taken up. And at this point, we're at, I think, about 12 gigabytes. And I still have a lot. Still got a lot. But hey, we're going to power through this. I know you'll be right here beside me, hopefully, when I'm all done with this. Still working on my final research paper. Did I just do it again? Did I just not take a blank picture? This is a disadvantage of talking, is that I did not take a blank photo. And do believe I just lost the picture. All right, hang on a second. This is where I've been dumping them, is into here. I should be looking for a oh, there we go. Okay. No plastic ones prior to this, so oof. It is a bit messy now. Okay. Finally gonna get this on track this time, and then I can get my mind on track, hopefully. Okay. Yeah, still working on my research paper project. It has to be a minimum of 13 pages, and with my notes still tacked in there that I haven't fully developed that section, I'm well on the way. It's really just a matter of continuous, probably a couple more days worth times of sitting there in front of my computer, hoping that it'll write itself, realizing that it won't, and then just mashing buttons and keys until we come out with something satisfactory. Honestly, that's the biggest issue, since a lot of these classes that I'm taking, all of them, are pass-fail classes now in light of the COVID stuff. So it's been somewhat difficult trying to maintain motivation when I was already doing fairly decent in the classes, and if I honestly just gave up now, I could just take the pass, which doesn't affect my GPA. Not like I really care much about that, though. I'm certainly not what you would call a academic diehard or anything. Already got a little fuzzy. Oh no. Okay. Now, Photolol did not address this last time, so I will be the one to address the elephant in the room. There were a few items which I was supposed to present here on the desk or table while working on these things, because Photolol managed to guess the VHS tape that I was looking at behind the camera. Not only did I not remember what it was that Photolol was asking for, I also forgot. So I forgot last time. I ran out of time in preparation this time. All this dusting off of these particular slides was done earlier today. Since I decided to have today just be an off day, I don't have any pressing academic assignment or anything to work on aside from that research paper. So I've just been relaxing. In absolute sorrow, I finished the last of my beer about 40 minutes ago. Oh, what a tragedy that's been. But there's other things to suffice. Take a stab as to what it is I'm drinking. I forgot to bring it down here, so there's a dresser to my left, it'd be your right. I set my drink atop, and it'd be nice to have it in a minute when I have hopefully had my throat get dry from talking so much. Guess I could talk a little bit about what I am anticipating will be a good cleansing project. Much in the way of things like this, except this is for somebody else, where I take a huge chunk of medium and synthesize it into some other format, or just process it through my noggin, and then dispatch of the excess, which there's usually more excess than there is the stuff that's valuable. In this case, it is my ridiculously sized book collection that I have not accessed fully. I haven't read a lot of the books that I have acquired, mainly because I acquired them for free out of the job that I worked at. When they were getting ready to throw them away, I would take them if they were of a topic that sounded interesting to me. And I feel like I'm treading old ground here, so suffice it to say, a couple hours ago, I dragged a whole bunch of boxes into here, just chock full of books, and it's been pretty fun. Looking through all these things that I collected over the years, I started grabbing the majority of the books that I have in 2014 and 2015, and it's amazing to think that that was years and years ago, and I still haven't read a lot of them. But there were a lot of them that I did read, that looking at the pile of ones that I had at least read extensively of, I was surprised. I usually interpreted myself as more of a book hoarder, less of a book reader. But yeah, it's the plan is to since Bertha and I are planning on going to our college town now on my birthday, so a little bit before May, as opposed to just waiting it out and seeing whether or not the stay-at-home order is still in effect, which I'm imagining it will be extended. That's just me. But we're planning on going back, and she is taking summer courses, and her degree program, the both of them, she's been double majoring in journalism and fine arts, but I think it's just arts now. But the both of them are very work-intensive programs, and as such demand a lot of her time. And I don't want to be an intrusive individual in what is a very, I think it's a small apartment, but hey, I don't live in New York City. My brother came to visit us one time, and he was amazed at the size that we had for the amount of money that we spent per individual on rent. He's been living in Brooklyn for quite a while now. I think at this point, almost 5 years. And it's been a lot of ups and downs, as I would expect nothing less from that city. Yeah, so I don't want to be too much of a nuisance if we're going to be stuck indoors the majority of the time. And so there's plenty of projects I could get taken care of during the summer. Since I'm not taking summer classes, I could start developing lesson plans. I tried doing that last summer and managed to get some good headway in on some future courses where I'd ever teach them. I could do that. I could do some family history stuff. There's a bit of a hindrance there just in terms of this bulk of material that, not the bulk, a large amount of material, a significant amount of material that I have yet to have access to. Once I do, then I can really start locking down that project. There's a couple of custodial things I could do as well with like the digital archive that I have and everything. But and presumably these slides, if I'm not done with them, but here's hoping that I have the wherewithal to get them all done. So that may entail doing a little of this on the side, outside of slide time. Unless people wouldn't mind just dead silence while I'm just sitting here clicking away. But I imagine that'd be so dull and kind of the worst ASMR video you could possibly imagine. But if I do have these done, if I don't have access to the family history stuff that I want to have access to really like finish the stuff I've been working on, but really the thing that I want to try and tackle during the summer is reducing the size of that book collection to books that I'm actually going to read, as opposed to shelf pieces or things where it's like, oh, this looks good if I have this, like biographies of particularly eminent individuals. If it's not interesting to me and it's not well written, there's no real point in keeping it. So at this point, I have, let's see, I have 3 boxes right now of books to be investigated. And the way I'm going to do that is just reading maybe at most a quarter, at the very least like 20 pages per book to really get a feel. I feel an adequate, or some percentage. Maybe that's what I'll do. Some percentage of the book that will feel like it's a decent enough sample size for me to really know whether or not I'm going to be invested in the long run. Though at least with academic literature, there's a lot of times where it might seem quite appealing, quite tantalizing, and you work your way through the book, and then page 200, they just throw some very interesting interpretations of things at you, and then you're like, wow, I would not have jumped to that conclusion. I was talking with my mother about that and being bamboozled into those situations sometimes at college, and it's something that I call the 200-page trap or page 200 trap, where they feel like you've made enough of a commitment that you're not going to back out, and so you're going to listen to their idea. But there may be a better term for it. Anywho, I got 3 boxes of that stuff, so that ought to be pretty interesting. It varies quite a bit in topic. In that regard, I'm very much a general knowledge kind of individual when it comes to interests. History is definitely the most interesting thing to me. And there's other categories or other subjects that I find particularly interesting. But there's also tons and tons that I know absolutely nothing about, but will be interested to learn about. And I even get a small handful of books that I'm just straight up getting rid of. Looked at it and it was like, I don't really feel like reading it. A lot of that is reference material that is accessible via the internet, the kind of things that you really don't need a reference book for. Some exceptions to that, though. There's a book I have. It's a big, fat, I think it's the Oxford Encyclopedia of Music, classical music. And I was helping an associate of my mother's. It might not even have been an associate. It might have just been someone that knew my mother and vicariously knew that she had sons who could help. She was clearing out her, she was my mother's age, so she was clearing out her mom's home, and her mother was a child psychologist, and I went over to that house to help clear out the place, and oh my goodness, was it, not only was it huge, it was a very bizarrely structured house. There were like 3 different terraces within it that were very hard to distinguish. When I say terraces, I guess I mean like levels of the home that weren't even with each other. So you could never tell what floor you were on because there were floors in the house. There were like 3 floors and a basement-ish. But to the far right of the house, you were in the basement, but you were about at waist height level in the rest of the first floor. It was very bizarre structure. It looked like it had been built over a long period of time and added on to with different extensions and stuff. And it was on a hill, so I think the hill really contributed to how it looked. But anywho, it was very interesting seeing an old-fashioned kind of psychologist's home that was also their workplace. The like western wing of the house was definitely where she took patients or clients. And she had one of those like classic side couch things that kind of look all Romany. I'm trying to remember what those are called. She had one of those things. There was a harpsichord just chilling out on the side of the place and everything. But yeah, over the whole span of the time that I was there, and it was a good amount of hours. I was going to say a couple, but it was like 4 or 5 hours. As a token of her appreciation, I can't remember if I got paid, but I don't think I was asking for money. Or I was working with the expectation I was receiving nothing out of it. But she handed me this reference encyclopedia that was her mother's from the library about music. And it was just not an interest to me, but she spoke about it as though she was well versed in just got lots and lots of fuzzies. It's really hard to get rid of. She spoke about it as though she had read or was exposed to a handful of reference encyclopedias on music in her own day because she said that it was certainly one of the higher quality ones. I'm not really certain how you gauge that as a non-professional, as a non-scholar, especially at that time. I was definitely not even on the path of scholasticism. And yet I took it. And so I've had it this entire time. I don't know that I've looked in it more than a handful of times. But it's one of those ones that's kind of difficult to get rid of just because of the weirdness of the circumstance in which I was bestowed it. And reference materials, those are ones. There's some things where it's like this is easy to get rid of, because I could find any of this information online. And then there's other stuff where it seems indispensable in that who knows if I can find it online. I have I believe it's 5 volumes, 5-volume documentary history of children in America as a continent from, I think, the 1630s into the 1960s when they made it. One of those things that I've only kind of briefly touched into, but the library I worked for was getting rid of it. And it just seemed like such a waste of paper that they were just going to chuck it all in there. And it seemed like the kind of thing that you certainly wouldn't like be able to find easily on the internet. I need a documentary history of children that's accessible to me online. Who knows? Yeah, that sort of thing and the encyclopedia on music are kind of hard to get rid of, or feel like I could get rid of them. But it's not like I've been using them in the college town. So who knows? Let's see. Just checking to see I have a viewer, so hopefully you've got some suggestions in the wings just in case start blanking on things to talk about. I could talk about what else did I do aside from books? Got an email from a very strange professor. I asked for a clarification on a question I had raised in class. There was a statue that we looked at of the first Roman emperor, Augustus. And it was one that was created posthumously, given a title as well that is probably not what it was called. Definitely not what it was called. It was the Augustus of Prima Porta. Beautiful statue. Like masterful craftsmanship for something that's like about 2,000 years old. And it's supposed to depict Augustus as a god. And the way that it shows you he is divine is that he isn't wearing shoes, that he's barefoot. And so I asked in class why being barefoot was a signifier of divinity, what the symbolism was to that. And my professor, again, kind of an oddball, in some ways inoffensively, in other ways very annoyingly. But he leaned like during a class discussion, he came over and leaned right into me, and he was like, I don't know the answer to that immediately, but I'll look into it. I was like, okay. And I thought nothing of it until just last night. We had to submit a very brief history paper that was sort of an analysis of a primary source, and I chose the Res Gestae, which is Augustus's autobiography that basically just touts all of his deeds, the things that he had achieved in his lifetime. It was meant to be posted on the sides of walls, on massive columns. The original inscription was on 2 massive bronze columns in Rome. But they have found it all over the place, especially in the Middle East, where a lot of those buildings have survived the test of time a bit more. But clearly it was disseminated all over the place to really solidify this image of him as a bit of an overachiever. But yeah, so we had to submit our assignment yesterday, and that got me thinking about the statue thing again. I couldn't find any satisfactory answers online, so I shot him a follow-up to see whether or not he had found anything else out. And he hadn't, but it was nice to get some one-on-one communication with that prof. It seems at times kind of difficult to maintain connections, especially with all this transition into online learning, maintaining connections with our professors that, for people who want to learn, say what you will about my intelligence, but I do want to learn. That for people who want to learn, it really does help to have a rapport or some sort of connection, some kind of dialogue going on with your professor, especially if you're struggling in a class. This Roman history class, Roman history is not my forte. I think the last time I was exposed to it was in middle school at the private school that I went to for a brief stint. And it was very much modeled on a liberal arts, classical liberal style education, in that we were going to learn of the classics. We were going to learn of Greek culture and Roman culture, and Egypt, of course. Nothing really said much about the Middle East, but hey, or China. But that was really the last time that I was exposed to this stuff. And the class did not require you have a prior knowledge, which made me think, even though it was a 300 level course at the college I go to, that was something I'd be able to tackle if I just worked hard enough at it. And that first couple days was just so disheartening. So many of these people had like these inside Rome history jokes. It's very much a clique in the way that ancient history buffs talk with one another. Yeah, so it's been a challenge, this class. The Middle East class that I'm taking, it's also an area that I'm not too familiar with, but the professor has certainly facilitated that much better. Whoops, I could just save this picture twice. Whoop. Now that is something that does not happen so often. Usually I just can't remember if I took it or not. Yeah, it's exactly the same. But yeah, in classes like that where it is a bit of a struggle, no matter how hard you're trying to learn, I think just knowing that you care as an individual, knowing that you as an individual are striving and doing the best with what you've got. I'm not going to say I'm doing the best that I possibly can, because that's not true, but doing the best with the materials at hand and the time that you're able to give to it, or willing to give. Yeah, so that's been a bit of a challenge, and that was a bit more reassuring, having that brief communication with him. Yeah, so I don't know if I stated, I don't believe that I did. He did not have an answer. He had some suggestions, though, and led me to a book on nudity in Rome and what the significance of it was in different contexts and everything. Seems like it ought to be a pretty interesting book. But I got to wait until I've cleared out my bookshelves a bit my future studies bookshelves, which ideally you'd be able to see every book that you own put up against a wall, but I don't know that I'd ever have the space unless I had a house well outside of my social standing and well outside of what I deserve as an individual. The key is to have a gigantic adoptive family, just 20 or 30 people all living in a mansion. And then it's not a gross misuse of that space. This stack's going to be nice right here. Whole bunch of the plastic ones, just be able to slide them right in. Oh, my mother told me that a coworker of hers had a question for me. And initially, got my hopes up just a little bit that it might be a job about digitizing something, because I don't have a job right now in light of all the COVID stuff. My job was non-essential, and I don't exactly have a mode of transportation of my own to get me to a job if I were to even try and get one right now. So kind of coasting along right now, and hopefully it won't get too desperate. But I thought it might be an archiving job. It was not, but instead it was a inquiry into providing some guideposts or resources to a coworker of hers son, who is not a history buff. That was the big deal, was that he's not a history buff and he's required to do a history research project. To which my mind immediately went, oh my God, why did he pick this class? Yeah, it's been a bit of a challenge trying to think of things to lead him to primary sources, because the idea that they want to work with is starting with a primary source and then developing their topic from that. The important thing is the choice first, rather than the other way around usually, where you have a subject or a topic and you look for primary sources that will support you in your investigation of it. So I'm not entirely certain what to send over to him. I found some ideas, but some of these primary sources were pretty dense and pretty long, which got me wondering, so he's not a history buff, but is he like an avid reader? Or is he, does he have particular curiosities or interests that could play into this history stuff, making the subject or topic more interesting or more appealing to write about and read about? But I sent an email to my mother's coworker. I haven't heard anything back from her, so who knows? At this point, though, I've come up with nothing definite. I was thinking maybe he could find some topic within the life of Governor Morris, which I'm always amazed that was the man's name was Governor. Governor, first name, or Governor as first name, Morris as second. This picture looked so creepy to me at first, but it's just my imagination. I saw a face where there was not one. Those are sometimes quite eerie. Oof. I thought I took that picture twice. I did not. Anybody ever seen The Room? I mean, at this point, it's quite the cultural phenomena. I remember back when Netflix was mail order largely, with the streaming being a slightly more challenging or frustrating medium than just getting the DVDs in the mail. I got that film in the mail and watched it on my own, which was mistake number one. Do not watch The Room on your own if you haven't seen it, just because it'll feel like a waste of time. It's a bad movie, but bad movies are fun with other people. They're just kind of disappointing and make you feel gross if you're by yourself. I don't know why I asked whether or not you'd ever seen The Room, but for some reason it came to mind. My brother actually got a poster for The Room signed by one Tommy Wiseau, and he, I believe it was he, took, or no, it was a friend of ours, took a DVD of an anime that Photolol gave them to have Tommy sign, and Tommy Wiseau just signed it. So now I can't remember what the anime was, and if Photolol was here, be able to help clarify. But there's an anime out there with Tommy Wiseau's name on it, and I do think that could be a very amusing trend in fundraising, if ever there was a need to kind of reinvigorate that industry. Having celebrities sign things that have nothing to do with who they are. K-On, right. Thank you, Bertha. That's definitely, I think that's definitely what it was. Yeah, Bertha and I actually went to go see The Room in theaters. There's a local art theater. I say local, it's like 40 minutes away, or really half an hour. But there's a theater that on a yearly basis-ish has shown The Room. And I believe almost, I'm in the plastic ones. I believe almost every single time that they've shown The Room, they get Tommy to come and do a little talk beforehand. So if ever we are to meet in the physical realm, you will be 1 degree away from the legend himself. He's a weird guy, though. It certainly came across when we went to go see it. And also that if it's going to be your first view, do not watch it at a theater. Just lots and lots of shouting and noise to the point where you can't even tell what the dialogue is. And that's part of the joy that is that movie, is the truly bizarre dialogue and delivery. These things are so easy to do when they're plastic. These pictures are quite blurry. They almost look like photos from nowadays, in that, like, the kind that someone would just take on their phone, not really like a posed portrait, which is not a bad thing. It's nice to get a little slice of people's casual lives back in the day. Like, these pictures are 38 years old, I believe. 82, yeah, 38 years old. It's hard to believe that a lot of the people in these pictures I know through Bertha's family, and have met and had conversations with, that these people are probably around my age in these photos, some of them at least. Bertha, what should I talk about? certainly don't want to bore you with things you've heard before. Oh, I think we lost Bertha, guys. Let's see. My sister went to a tooth doctor today. Things went pretty good for her. Previous conversation about that. Couple of where do I put? I'll put these here. A couple of slide conversations ago. Do you think I should come up with a better thumbnail? There's a pressing question. I feel as though the thumbnails that I'm doing are just a little too boring. Not a whole lot of creativity going into just thumbs up or this little monkey man being force-fed a slide. What have I been doing to stay sane? That's a great one. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. The dynamic here. It's nice to be back home. It's nice to be around my family. With the exception of my brother, he's still out in New York. But it can be mentally draining. So, in all honesty, and it's not going to sound healthy, in all honesty, a lot of what I've been doing to stay sane is drinking. Not to the point where I'm like completely out of it, but enough to the point where I'm fuzzy feeling. Certainly, thankfully, I haven't built up any kind of dependency, I don't think. Like, I'm not like constantly craving alcohol, but it's a nice thing to have after a day of classes. Yeah. Disadvantage of sliding these things along is I can't tell. All right, got it done. Any baking? I have done no baking. Shocker, I know. Yeah, I've done no baking. I've had baked goods. My mother has made zucchini bread twice now. And the second time, oof, she made two that were very different kinds of loaves. The one, she kept calling her coffee cake loaf because of the crumblies on top of it, and it very much has the consistency of a coffee cake, which is quite interesting considering it's zucchini. But she puts some blueberries in the zucchini bread that she's been making, and oof, it really just adds like a nice little zing of tart. Thought it was so interesting. I was talking to my mom and my sister, and both of them said that they don't like tart fruit, specifically like strawberries, blackberries, blueberries, and that they like the sweet ones instead. I just find that so interesting because when I think of berries, I think of that tart, acidic taste. And it's very strange to think that there are people who would not only not think of that, but not desire it out of their little berries. Oh, that's a great shot. It's like a woman on like a floaty raft thing. Yeah, amen, Bertha. Tart blackberries are the bomb. I'm just so distracted by the beauty of that picture, I gotta see whether I actually captured it. I did, okay. Yeah, with a little bit of a like cropping and touch up on that, that'd be quite a nice photo. Like for a wall or something. There's only so much wall space out there in the world. a acquaintance, I would say friend, but I feel as though this particular individual, despite us being digital friends, isn't particularly interested in a friendship or maintaining one from when we first met, at this point almost a decade ago. But she posted about a documentary called They Chose China that I'm planning on watching tonight. Thankfully, Canopy, which is a library streaming service, usually for like artsy films and stuff like that, they had it. So it was like, sweet, can do it for free. But I had never heard of the documentary before, and I've taken a lot of Asian studies courses at college, and specifically a lot of things about the history of China. So thought it'd be especially interesting to me to get yet another insight into the history of China. And it's a documentary that's about, from what I read, it's about 50 some odd U.S. Soldiers who, oh, that's my mother, if you hear someone screaming. Oh, she usually screams twice. Oh, there we go. Yeah, it's about 54 U.S. soldiers who, after the Korean War was over, opted not to go back to the United States and chose instead to defect and stay in China. They were prisoners of war, and a lot of people were concerned that they had been brainwashed. But it sounds like there was an equal concern that they had just fallen into the trap that was communism, and that they deserved to be prosecuted on American soil, all that other kind of stuff and everything. And apparently it just goes over and like examines these people's lives. A lot of them ended up coming back to the US, it sounds like, and trying to lead very quiet lives. Though a couple of them seem to have led particularly fascinating lives. There was one that I read on the internet, has a autobiography that wasn't published in his lifetime, but it was about his life. He was a black soldier who was disaffected with the racism in the United States and in his in the army, and so he opted to stay in China with the other 54. But they didn't all stay together. They went different places within China, and he and a couple of the other guys ended up working in like a paper mill in a city in China. Apparently learned a little bit of Chinese, and he ended up marrying a Chinese woman and had some kids with her, and then they came back to the United States, and it was one of those ones where he lived a very quiet life. He came back because in the Cultural Revolution in the 60s, apparently, this is something we never got taught about the Cultural Revolution. There was a wave of anti-foreign sentiment, regardless of whether or not you identified with China politically. If you weren't of China or were not Chinese, you were looked down upon. So I believe that was the impetus for them leaving, especially because their children were looked at as not being fully Chinese. So it ought to be an interesting documentary. Oh, right on, Bertha. Look at that. Zucchini bread is the mode of the day. Well, you take it easy, my love. I think I'm chatting with you later. I think you might be part of that video call if you were able to do that time. If not, I'll talk to you later regardless. Making pretty good progress here, guys. I mean, it's been almost an hour, but we finished a set of slides. We're on to, or we're at this point, we're working our way to the halfway point of slide set number 2. To be totally honest, I'm actually going to go grab my OJ. That was the mystery beverage. In case you're curious about the shirt, I'm certain you're not. It is the nonprofit that my mother works for. They got locations all across the U.S., and they're all kind of switching their mission. Because what they normally do is design inside houses, and since you can't really go into other people's homes for fear of infection or contracting the virus, they're switching it up so that they can make these sort of modular turning houses into home kits, house in home kits, which I may have to suggest that name or something along that. Little boxes filled with things like a bathroom in a box, bedroom in a box, those sorts of things, and then distributing those to homeless shelters to be able to give to people when they acquire a home or a living arrangement. But yeah, just really enjoyed that that company, or the nonprofit, I guess, organization. And some of these pictures are absolutely atrocious selfies. It's rare that the selfie is a high art form in my personal experience with it. Oftentimes it just look absolutely hideous. I almost feel like the opposite of the point of a selfie is how it is for me. Kind of drawing a blank again. Man, oh man. Saw a friend from a long time ago on Instagram and his fiance. They've been quarantining with his parents, which has got to be a pretty nice setup. But clearly they were a little bit bored last night, so they were doing a whole bunch of those sort of Instagram face recognition-y kind of game things, and one of them was you had to draw a picture in like 5 seconds with your nose, and your nose was like on, it was like a pen that's on the paper the entire time, so you don't get to like lift your hand. And it was so funny. His fiance, every single thing that she was given, it looked just like a mushroom, different kinds of mushrooms. It was like the only thing that she seemed capable of drawing. But it was nice that they vicariously shared their relaxing time with all their buds. Photolol was actually talking about doing a stream themselves at some point. Should be a nice thing to take a peek at, though. I haven't heard any info as to when it's going to happen or what it's going to be. But I thought it was funny because Photolol asked if it was okay if they copied me, to which I felt immediately it's like I did not invent this nonchalant streaming stuff where I don't have much in the way of structure or anything, so it isn't stealing at all. You guys play any video games? It's been a while since I've sat down and just really immersed myself within a game. I can certainly play games, and I certainly have played games, but actually kind of diving right in and losing yourself a little bit within that world, a world that somebody else has created or anything like that, just hasn't happened in a while. But be curious to know what your favorite games are, or what your favorite genre of game is. I know for Bertha, it's these massive open world high fantasy kind of pseudo RPGs with a lot of customization elements to it, at least in terms of like customizing your build of your character, and an equal variety, if not more so, of side quests. I do believe that's what Bertha lives for, is side quests, well done side quests. So naturally, The Witcher 3 is her favorite game. Ish. I'd say it's her favorite game. I don't know that it's her favorite game. One she enjoys a lot, though. There's a lot of fond memories of. With the exception of Yarpen. She's not a fan of Yarpen. And I don't blame her. Nobody should be a fan of Yarpen. There has been some metaphorical baking in the house, in that my sister has been using a lot of pot. Like a week ago, I don't think she meant to do this intentionally. Just breathed just a huge cloud of pot smoke right into my face, and never been a fan of that smell. Just having it rush into my esophagus, down my nasal cavity and into my esophagus was just absolutely not horrifying, but nauseating. But it helps with a lot of things. Helps with pain and anxiety and all those other kinds of things. So certainly not knocking it, but definitely not something I'd partake in. Mostly for the smell. Probably an equal degree also a lack of desire to engage in mind-altering substances, which sounds so hypocritical, I say, that I say that when I drink alcohol. But, I don't know. To each their own, and it is not mine. A bit of the process of transcribing my father's Facebook posts, because he only had Facebook for about a little over a full year, I believe, before he died of lung cancer almost a decade ago. But it's been really fun looking through his Facebook posts because I was quite young at the time, or just not particularly attentive to what my father was saying on Facebook because I could just talk to him about it in person if he had something to say. So it's been interesting seeing some things and kind of seeing them and processing them for the first time. Like very shortly after he was diagnosed, um, he was taking a very dark perspective on it, which was not at all how I remembered it. Him being, he was kind of just in despair, or feeling as though he was just gonna die. Like it was like really no question about it. It was just what was gonna happen. But I remember him being overly optimistic, so it was interesting to see on there. And I do think that in some ways he was very much a old man when it came to internet and technology and things like that, and that he was really using it as a diary that people could comment on, what it felt like a lot of the time. There is such a overwhelming smell of piss down here. And it's because of the humidity outside. I mean, it was snowing, but like wet snow for so long today. And then it got warm, and it's all just mush now. But the ground is soggy. It's so wet out there. Sheesh. So tired right now, and yet I had coffee, had tea. I did stay up until like 3 a.m. last night, but that was just because it's difficult to keep track of time when time feels so meaningless. Just staying in the same area, just looking at the same things, doing the same stuff. But I'll get out of my whiny hole now. Anyhow, the reason I brought up my father is because I saw he was a pretty avid smoker and drinker, but he clearly had some sort of hesitancy from hesitancy to take other mind-altering substances because somebody had told him during all of his chemo treatments on his Facebook that he could go and get medicinal marijuana, to which he responded, I don't need it. And something else to the effect that he was not interested at all, which is interesting. Similar perspective to myself, but I don't know that he and I ever spoke about that kind of thing. All right, I have an object above me. There's an object above myself that you put into your mouth. I'll give you till the end of the stream to guess what it is. Something that you put in your mouth that people probably don't really use anymore and is yellow. And not colored. It's not colored yellow. It is naturally yellow. There was no process to make it yellow. Just can't stop yawning. Let's see. I could talk a bit about bit about trying to think of topics of interest. Next time, I swear this will be true. On Wednesday, I'll have a list of just like one word or one sentence topics to just bring to the table. That way I'm not just sitting here wasting your time yawning. So we had this game on the Super Nintendo called Smart Ball. I think it has a official name that is not Smart Ball, but that is the American version of the name. And that is the closest in my childhood that I ever got to actually beating a video game without parental help. Not that my parents were particularly skilled to the point where we'd have been able to beat any games. But back in the day, that used to be a huge thing in my family. Was treating video games as a communal thing. My mother and father and I, we all played The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time on our borrowed neighbor's Nintendo 64. But we all played the game together because they knew I was interested. They were both interested. I mean, video games were like becoming kind of a new-ish thing to like the general populace, as opposed to just like dedicated techie nerds. But there are creatures and there are parts of Ocarina of Time that were quite oops. So I think I moved that while it was capturing the image, and so it'll have blurred. So I just took the image again. But yeah, Smart Ball, I tried picking it up again as an adult. That is one frustrating game. Lots of tricky controls to try and work around. You really don't get a lot of health. I think for a large chunk of the game, you only have like three little hits, and then you're dead. Just gonna check and see real quick if Photolol. I don't think Photolol is present. Photolol may be sleeping or something right now. Just shoot a line over and see. I know I took this picture, I just don't know if I took it twice. I did not. So, phew. Uh-oh. And we crashed. So let me just unplug this here. It must have been quite amusing to see just fiddling around. Who knows? This thing may be getting pretty close to the end of its life. It has taken a lot of pictures. I was going to say thousands. I might even say well over 10,000 pictures that I've taken, if I count the individual frames from the two real films that I made digital copies of. Yeah, I've had this thing for a long time now, so who knows? That might be why it's freezing up. It might also just be because of the way that the setup is. I forgot to bring the plug-in for it, so I'm using a iPhone's little plug adapter thing. I don't think that would be any better or worse, but I also don't know. Jesus. I'm boring myself. One of the individuals that I'm seeing pictures of in here, I know him now as an adult. It's Bertha's eldest brother. Every time I see pictures of him as a young man, I can't help but think of this VHS tape, also of himself as a young man, where he rapped the Vanilla Ice rap, or lip synced to it, and did a whole bunch of sick dancing. It's a great video. Ever heard of a challenge coin before? I had never heard of a challenge coin until yesterday, when I was reading up on British and Australian drinking culture, as you do. There was some mention of some practice of drinking culture in the United States, particularly among the military, where you present challenge coins to prove that you're a member of a particular military group, and that you would have the coin with you so that if somebody called you out on being a member, you disproved it, and then if that particular individual didn't have a coin or was incapable of proving that, or was part of your group and did not have their coin, then drinks were on them. Thought that was a very unusual thing. Apparently, challenge coins are like a kind of thing that was present in the Roman Empire, but certainly it's never come up in class. It does make me wonder, though, whether or not a lot of the coinage that has been found from Rome as a republic and as an empire is not actually currency and is more like these kind of challenge coins, or like a proof of your affiliation with something. Jesus, House Party app makes very bizarre sounds. It sounded like my phone was breaking there. Pictures have some pretty messy wallpaper in the background. busy at the very least. Does anybody else think that the actor who plays Ted Mosby is very similar looking to Jimmy Kimmel? Like they might be related? I could certainly see a resemblance there, were it the case. And if not, I think there might be a doppelganger loose. But it was so weird when I saw ads for this FX original series called What We Do in the Shadows. It's obviously based on a New Zealand comedy film, also titled What We Do in the Shadows, that the one guy from Flight of the Conchords, if you've never heard them, they're a great comedy band. One of them is involved in the project, or was involved in the film. It was like comedic look at the life of some vampires in New Zealand. That movie was great. I do not know how that would translate into a show, especially how it would translate well. But hey, I am by and large quite skeptical. When it comes to stuff like that, it's difficult to get on board the hype train. All right, guys. On to slide set 3 of 4. And I have the 100 still on here. I meant to clear it off and I didn't. Still have the 100 from Wednesday's undertaking. So by the end, we'll have just a little under 500 pictures done this time to be put on a computer. Nervous habit there. I don't know why I did that. My sister made dinner this evening. That was quite nice. Nothing too crazy, just some pesto on some tortellini with some fake chicken. Everybody that's currently living in this house is vegetarian. I can never tell with my brother. It seems on again, off again, but I think that's part of the New York lifestyle is you're kind of always in flux. You're changing. Some aspect to you has to be changing, otherwise you're just stagnant. But yeah, it was pretty good. It's the first time that she's made dinner in the month, I believe, that I've been back. Maybe even a month and a half. Part of that whole losing track of time thing. I feel like we came back here. Oh no, I think it's just been a month. So I think we came back when it wasn't even the middle of March yet. So my college sent out an email. I have not read it, but I can extrapolate from the title what they're going to be complaining about, which is that they offered to provide relief to students who may need some funds to perpetuate themselves during all this COVID stuff, since presumably they were in school. They may or may not have had essential jobs. And if they didn't, but they still need to do things like pay for rent, they're in a bit of a pickle, a bit of a bind. But my guess is that they got way more applications, requests for it than they anticipated. Because the title of the email was something along those lines, like numerous requests for relief. It was like, I had a feeling they're going to say because there's so many, we can't do it. We can't provide it for you. Which would not be above them, or not be below them. I think what I was trying to say was that they would not be above doing that, so that they would be below doing it. Whatever. My brain is clearly French fries. Trying to think of topics. Let's see. Talk about. I guess we could talk about comic books. I'm not a huge comic reader. I feel like I'm in a bit of a minority when it comes to that, in my family at least. My mother's not a huge comic reader either, but my sister and my brother both read graphic novels. My brother reads them a lot, I think. And my father was also a comic book reader. But I not so much. Until we were exposed to the world of Calvin and Hobbes when I was a kid. And even though the majority of that humor is just not children's humor, isn't not that it's like raunchy or inappropriate, more like a kid's just not going to understand it or think it's funny. This happened a lot when I grew up with comedic things, that a lot of the jokes were directed at adults, but rather than it being a cool, edgy part of that media, I was just left to kind of like nervously laugh and be like, oh, adults think this would be funny, so this must be very highbrow humor, which it rarely is. A lot of times it's like just proto reference humor, which is the kind of humor we're just saturated by, at least here in the US. Just reference humor, cutaway gags, all that other kind of stuff. Just listening to some Captain Beefheart the other day, even a little bit today. There's an album of his that I grabbed called Shiny Beast Bat Chain Puller, which was a attempted like reconstruction of an album that he was legally not allowed to release. I can't remember exactly why, but it involved his manager taking funds to produce the album that were not his to take. And so the control of those master tapes went to somebody else. But Don Van Vliet, that's Captain Beefheart, his solution was to just whoop, that image had not brightened up. When it goes to change the exposure, whoop, sometimes I jump the gun. But yeah, it's pretty good. The only album of his that I had that I listened to semi frequently was oh God, I guess this doesn't really matter. The difference is not as drastic as I thought it was. Um, the only album of his I had that I listened to on a fairly consistent basis was Trout Mask Replica. And that's another one of those things that if you've never heard it, I highly recommend it. It's bizarre, and I would bet you that some people would argue it's not even musical, but it's good. Safe as Milk is his like first album, and I've heard that a handful of times, but I almost feel like the title recognizes that it's very safe music. Didn't really like try to do too much in the way of like craziness or pushing the limits. But in Shiny Beast, Bat Chain Puller, I feel like they blend kind of, I don't know, snappy, poppy music with the oddness that is Captain Beefheart. So yeah, it's been fun to listen to. Especially when I see a mummy, or when I see a mommy, I feel like a mummy. Which, I mean, what a name. What a name for a song. You guys familiar with Tony J at all? The guy who did the voice and singing voice for Claude Frollo and Disney's Hunchback of Notre Dame. Absolutely impeccable voice. I'm really surprised he didn't do much more in the way of movie musicals. Seems to have been an active theater guy. But a while back, I found that he actually had made a album, but it was a very bizarre album because it was all spoken word of classic songs. I know for a fact this guy can sing, so why did they get him to just talk over music? There are some people who can really do that and do that well, like Ken Nordine. If you've never heard him, he's fantastic. I don't remember what he calls his genre of spoken word. Word jazz. That was what he called it. Word jazz. I just realized I really don't have much in the way of Ken Nordine, as much as I could. The college that I go to is, as I've mentioned before, a pretty extensive library. So extensive that my mind just kind of goes blank as to what things I should check and see if they have. And that's something right there. Some Ken Nordine albums. Let's see. Man, oh man, my hands are getting frozen. So much damn yawning. Before I do any more slides, I'm going to go grab a glass of water and splash some water in my face just to wake me the heck up. So I'll be back. What's that in his hands? Some Wawa and some candy. Uh-oh. Certainly. Whoops. And maybe this is supposed to come off. I'm gonna assume that was supposed to come off. Yeah, it certainly made it easier to open. These sea salt caramelly things are so good. A little sugar boost will maybe definitely help keep me awake. Except I just realized it's going to make it kind of hard to hear me talk. And that was kind of the point. Let's see. I accidentally found a book or rediscovered a book I have that was in those boxes that would actually be able to help me out just a little tiny bit in my research project. It's this one right here. It's probably backwards. I can't tell if it's actually backwards or not on the screen. But it's an introductory book on the Baha'i faith. Talks a little bit about some of the general overview of the practice. It's good to get those sorts of things from practitioners because it shows you what they don't consider general knowledge or worth being part of their general narrative. Damn, these things are so gooey. Water I grabbed is so damn cold. Some of these pictures are so unfortunately overexposed. What are you gonna do? Edit them in post. We'll fix it in post. I'm gonna move this all just a little bit closer so I can maintain better posture. I'm also going to try and speed things up just a little bit so that way I can try and get this done before my time limit. I don't know why I thought I was going to have about 2 hours since it's almost 7:40 and my video call is at 8. So I think I'm going to end this at 7:55 and hopefully I'll be done with it all. I'm thinking I won't be, but can strive. Truly, the only disadvantage of talking while doing this is that it does slow the process down. And it proves to me that I am not a multitasker, if that's even a thing. Apologies for the rattling of the table. For some reason, the legs are not stable. On the side to my left, so you're right, presumably you're right, over here, is missing one of the beam support things to hold up the middle part, but the rest of the structure is still there. And it's like wobbling on this end where it starts making the weird noise, so, or the rattly noise, so I don't know. Just saw a woman in a early 80s power suit, which is such a interestingly aggressive fashion choice. Ever read the series of unfortunate events? Learned a lot of very unusual vocabulary courtesy of that show, including a word that saved me in one of the only Words with Friends games where I ever beat my mother. And it was, I believe it was the title of the 6th book, The Ersatz Elevator. I can never remember what the word ersatz means. Maybe narrow or empty or something. Those are pretty good books. It's a shame that their adaptation into other media seems to have always been lacking something, and that the iterations that are still about of Count Olaf depict him as like this wheezy, goofy goober who's like a shitty person, but a crappy person, but he's still a little too humorous, both in Jim Carrey's form and Neil Patrick Harris. I've talked with people before. I think that, at least in my mind when I read the books, even though he was like super skinny and almost like a skeleton, I always pictured him having some deep, menacing, or overly dramatic baritone or bass voice. More baritone. I say like I know what I'm talking about. Gotta swallow that. Caramel. It's just too overpowering. But yeah, I think like the voice that I think of that I'm like, that would have been the Count Olaf for me in like an animated version or something, would have been Christopher Lee, who what a voice. He, along with, I believe, every single actor in the Lord of the Rings films, just like phenomenal casting. I do think it's one of the best casted series of films I think I've ever seen. Even now, I'm trying to like scramble and think of somebody who I didn't think was cast particularly well, and nothing comes to mind. There's even some weird ones. If you've never seen the show before, I highly recommend it for its trash fantasy appeal, and that's the Legend of the Seeker. It's very much in the vein of like Hercules or Xena, Warrior Princess. And a lot of the same people were involved behind the scenes on both. But one of the actors, one of the wizard, Zedekias Zulzarander, is played by this guy, and I can't remember his name. If I was feeling like cheating, I'd just look at my phone. But he's like this tall guy with a very odd looking face. And he was in, I believe he was in Road Warrior of the Mad Max films. He was the guy with the little gyrocopter. But he is actually in Lord of the Rings as well. He is in the extended version of the film. I actually think he's in the original too, of the Return of the King, with where he's the mouth of Sauron, which is such a weird role to cast him as, because it just required somebody with a mouth that looked odd. I don't know. And then they digitally enhanced the mouth anyways. So, I've been told that I've read the Lord of the Rings books, but I gotta be totally honest. I'm not certain that I ever did. I definitely read The Hobbit multiple times and have a fondness for it. I know that it's not particularly well written or that engrossing of a children's story. That may be some aspect of it, though, is that it's intended to be for children in a good way there. Not so much like this, it's okay that such and such movie is totally dumb, it's for kids. I don't think that The Hobbit's dumb. I just don't think that it's particularly challenging, or I guess, I don't know, everything that people like about Lord of the Rings. It's not as high fantasy, or focused on like the sword and sorcery aspects. But yeah, I don't think I've ever read Lord of the Rings. Maybe a little bit of Fellowship, but I was absolutely made certain of it today when I saw my father had quoted Gandalf from the film, and I wondered the scene. He was in Moria when he's talking with Frodo, about just like having to go through the times that we live in, even if they're incredibly challenging. We make do. I was curious whether or not it was actually a line from the book, or if it was something they had just made for the film. And it turned out it was a line from the book, and made me wonder how much of the dialogue is from the story. And again, an epiphany that, to all those who know me that say I've read them, nope, definitely not. I almost feel like the stench is on me. It's seeping into me, and I don't know where this smell of piss is coming from. Or I guess I do. It's from the what was wet carpet, I'm thinking, but apologies. I'm just checking to make certain I got this one. I did. Oh my goodness, it's 7:46. Okay. If I finish this, then we did 3 of the 4 that I had set up, which is totally fine. I'm totally fine with that. Would have liked to have gotten them all done. And hey, if I hadn't already signed up something else, I'd be able to. I've noticed on a couple of the Tiny Tim videos that I have, in addition to a stream that is no longer up, I was trying to figure out a way to stream some gameplay with my brother in New York, and the only way it seemed to do it was on YouTube. But certainly wasn't like easy, and it didn't work in the long run. But somebody commented on our gameplay, which you could not hear anything we said because we didn't have any mics set up or anything, so it was just silent gameplay. And someone commented, great content, keep up the good work. And it got me wondering whether, and I've seen a couple of those comments recently, whether or not there's been an uptick in robots kind of just floating around, commenting on people's things. Bertha's been uploading a whole lot of funny like clips from different shows and stuff that we've seen, different like bad they're good kind of shows. And there have been a couple comments on some of them that are very like that. They're like, great content, keep up the good work. It's almost exactly the same line each time too, which adds to the weirdness. And it'll say the person's name, but it's always like a mononym. So it's like Tim or Nick says or John. And they're always professional looking guys in their little thumbnails, but yeah, who knows? Can never tell with stuff like that. There was a different channel I used to have on YouTube where I was interested in doing like a music history video series, but I definitely am not like a video editor. Certainly not a passion in life, and it's certainly not something that I'm too keen on getting any better at. So I only made a couple of videos on there, but one of them I did a cover of John Cage's 4 minutes and 33 seconds, which is just absolute silence. Like you sit there and you do nothing in front of an instrument for 4 minutes and 33 seconds, and that's the piece. It's stupid in my mind. I get the idea behind it, but it's a pretty pretentious piece of art. And so I did that video, and it was one of the funniest comments to me because it got a handful of dislikes. But the only comment that went on there was somebody saying, I absolutely love this. Hey, I'm looking to collaborate musically. Would you be interested in some musical collaboration? It turned out it was a spam bot, but I should have known it was a spam bot when it told me that 4 minutes and 33 seconds of complete silence was good music, or that I had done a good job with the tune there. I did get a little overzealous in my cover, though, by moving my hands over the keyboard. Not pressing on it, though. But, yeah. Okay, I got 5 minutes. I got almost the same amount of slides as I do minutes. I think I'll be able to get this done and then have a little bit of excess time. What's the biggest bug you have ever touched? I think the biggest one I've ever touched, pet, was a hissing cockroach. Those Madagascar ones that are like maybe about that large. Tried to get Bertha to touch it. I can't remember if Bertha did. We were in New Orleans, and they have a huge bug museum there, and they were offering for people to pet the cockroaches, and I don't know that Bertha built up the courage to do that. They're cute little guys. I mean, I don't know that I'd ever want one, but they're certainly not creepy in the way that like the little ones are to me. All right, guys. And with that, we just finished in a little under 2 hours doing 300 pictures. So we did a bit better than I did last time when I had them all scrubbed up already. I think the first time that I did this on YouTube, it was like 2.5 hours, and it took me that long to do almost the same number. But yeah, we still had about 100 left I wanted to get done, but naturally that wasn't possible given my time frame. I'll certainly be able to get to those on Wednesday, though, and I'll have some other ones dusted off. And I don't have any plans Wednesday evening, so it might go a little bit longer. If we pull to 2.5 hours or something like that, then I may be able to get the 4 sets I'll have sitting out done. Until then, I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and stay warm if you're in an area where it's unseasonably cold. And ta-ta.